The first time my father stopped answering my calls, I told myself he was busy. The second time, I told myself I understood. By the 10th, I stopped telling myself anything at all. My mother had been dead 6 months when I joined the state fire service. I remember the morning clearly. The bathroom mirror was slightly warped along the edges, bending my reflection just enough to make me look uncertain. I buttoned the dark blue uniform shirt slowly, pressing each button through the fabric with deliberate care. My hands were steady. They had been steady at the funeral, too. My father stood in the hallway outside my bedroom door and watched. "You don't have to prove anything," he said. "I know," I answered. At the time, I believed him. When the acceptance letter arrived, he held it longer than I did. He read it twice before handing it back. That evening, he called 3 people to tell them. At church the following Sunday, he repeated my rank before I had even completed training. He spoke about discipline and public service as if he had personally instilled both in me. For a while, he called every Sunday evening at 7. I would step outside the barracks and lean against the cool brick wall while he asked about Jose pressure, about training burns, about whether the smoke ever made me hesitate. "It's different from the movies," I told him once. "Fire moves like it's thinking." He laughed at that. "You always did imagine too much." Then he married Diana. She wore pale colors and smiled with her mouth closed. The first time I met her, she held my hands in both of hers and looked directly into my eyes. "I've always admired strong women," she said. "Admiration is easy. Endurance is harder." At the wedding reception, she moved through the room like she had designed it. When people asked about me, she answered before I could. "Emma's in the fire service," she would say, tilting her head slightly. "Such a demanding career." The distance began in small increments. Calls shortened. Messages became formal. When I drove down one weekend, the spare key no longer worked in the front door. "We changed the locks," Diana said lightly when she opened it. "Security." My father stood behind her and smiled in a way that suggested agreement. After that, letters I mailed were returned unopened. Birthdays passed without acknowledgement. When I called, the phone rang until silence settled over the line like ash. Years do not have to be loud to be final. They can be quiet. They can simply continue. I transferred to the Redwood Division when the vacancy opened. The forests there were older, denser, patient in a way that felt almost deliberate. My small house sat at the edge of the suburbs, where asphalt ended and gravel began. In late summer, the air smelled faintly of resin and dry grass. At night, wind moved through the trees with a sound that felt like distant surf. I worked. I advanced. I learned to command crews older than me without raising my voice. I learned that control is rarely loud. It is measured. It waits. By the time I made incident commander, my father had not spoken to me in nearly 8 years. Then one afternoon in early spring, I opened my front door and found him standing on my porch. Diana stood slightly ahead of him, as if the threshold already belonged to her. "Emma," she said, stepping forward before I could respond, "we were in the area." My father lifted his chin. He looked older, but not softer. "You weren't answering," he said. Not a question. I looked past them at the rental car in my driveway, engine still ticking as it cooled. "I wasn't aware I needed to," I answered. Diana laughed lightly. "Family doesn't need invitations." I stepped aside because creating a scene on the porch would have required energy I preferred to conserve. They walked in without hesitation. Diana removed her coat and placed it over the back of a chair as if she had done so 100 times before. "It's modest," she said, glancing around the living room. "But Redwood property values are rising quickly. Smart choice." My father walked to the window overlooking the tree line. "You've done well," he said. "We're proud." The word hung between us, unclaimed. That first evening, Diana unpacked a suitcase in the guest room without asking how long they intended to stay. "We thought it might be good to spend time together," she said, smoothing the bedspread. "After everything." "Everything," I repeated. She nodded, as though the word explained itself. Over the next few days, her questions began, not direct, layered. How does the state structure your pension? Is the house solely in your name? You must have comprehensive life insurance. In your position, it would be irresponsible not to. She asked these things while washing dishes, while flipping through a magazine, while standing beside me in the garage as I checked equipment. My father rarely interrupted. When he did, it was to add small details. It's important to think long-term, he said once. Family stability. I watched them carefully. They were not here to reconnect. They were here to assess. On the third evening, I found Diana in my office. She stood by my desk holding a folder she had taken from the top drawer. "Is this your will?" she asked, smiling as if we were discussing a recipe. I walked across the room and removed it from her hand. "Yes," I said. "You're so young. It feels dramatic." "It's procedural," I replied. Her smile did not change, but something in her eyes did. That night, I stood in the backyard long after they had gone to bed. The trees beyond the fence shifted in the wind. The underbrush was thick this year. Rainfall had been low. Conditions were aligning. Inside, I heard Diana's low laughter and my father's measured tone. Their voices carried easily through the quiet house. Pressure does not announce itself. It waits. The following week, Diana suggested we review documents together. "For clarity," she said. "Just so we all understand what's where." I set my coffee down and looked at her directly. "What's where is documented," I said. My father cleared his throat. "No one's questioning you." The phrase lingered longer than he intended. 3 weeks after their arrival, Diana mentioned insurance again. "If something were to happen," she began carefully, "it would be comforting to know arrangements are simple." My father watched me over the rim of his mug. There was calculation there now, not affection, not pride. That same morning, dispatch called. Smoke sighted on Barnes Ridge. I stood immediately. Diana frowned. "Already? It's barely June." I reached for my jacket. "Be careful," my father said. Then, with a faint, almost private smile, he added, "Happy Father's Day, Lloyd." I paused. Councilman Lloyd Harper had once questioned my promotion publicly, calling it symbolic leadership during a town hall. My father had attended that meeting. He had not spoken. Now he said the name with something close to satisfaction. I looked at him carefully. The wind shifted outside, carrying the faint scent of smoke. I left without another word. The drive to Barnes Ridge took 17 minutes. I know because I counted them. Redwood Dispatch updated conditions as I moved through traffic. Wind 12 miles per hour, gusting higher along exposed slopes, humidity low, fuels dry, a column already visible from Highway 6. When I crested the last rise before the ridge, I saw it. Smoke rising in a vertical line at first, then flattening as wind caught it. The color was wrong, too dark, too dense. That meant heat. That meant speed. Engines were already staging along the access road when I arrived. Crews moved with practiced urgency, no wasted gestures, no raised voices. I stepped out of the command vehicle, and the air met me hard, hot and metallic. "Size up?" I asked. 200 acres and running," Captain Morales replied, pushing east toward Cedar Crest. "If it jumps the line, Mountain Hollow's next." Mountain Hollow. 200 homes, 1 elementary school, a narrow evacuation corridor that could choke in minutes. I watched the ridge through binoculars. Flame lengths already exceeding 20 feet in places. Spot fires beginning to appear ahead of the main front. Wind shifting slightly south, unstable. Councilman Lloyd Harper stood near the media perimeter, jacket off, tie loosened. He was speaking into a camera with deliberate calm. "We have full confidence in our response," he said. When he saw me, he paused, then nodded once. Measured. Public. Years ago, he had questioned my readiness for this role, called my promotion a progressive experiment. I had not answered him then. There had been no need. Today, there was less. "Status?" he asked as I approached. "Evolving," I said. Evacuation order for Cedar Crest recommended immediately. His jaw tightened. That's aggressive. It's necessary. Behind him, cameras shifted slightly closer. He studied my face, searching for hesitation. I gave him none. Within minutes, evacuation alerts went out. Sirens echoed faintly through the valley. I turned back to the ridge. Fire behavior was intensifying. The head was building a convection column that could generate its own weather. If that happened, we would lose control of direction entirely. Morales stepped beside me. If it breaches the fuel break, we won't hold Cedar Crest. I knew. The subdivision sat in a shallow bowl lined with ornamental trees and untreated wood fencing. Beautiful. Vulnerable. Behind Cedar Crest lay a narrow drainage that funneled wind directly toward Mountain Hollow. If the fire aligned with that channel, we would not stop it before it reached the town. I watched the flame front crest a line of scrub oak and surge forward in a sudden run. Heat rolled toward us in visible waves. The call formed in my mind fully before I spoke it. We burn Cedar Crest. Morales did not blink. Controlled? Yes. A backburn along the western perimeter. Remove the fuel before the main front arrived. Sacrifice structures to save the valley. No one wants to give that order. Media's gonna crucify this, another officer muttered. They can, I said. Later. I stepped into the mobile command unit and began issuing directives. Strike teams repositioned. Air support rerouted to protect the ignition corridor. Law enforcement expanded evacuation radius. Utilities were contacted to cut power. Outside, Lloyd approached again. You're not seriously planning to burn private homes, he said quietly. I'm planning to prevent a fatality cluster, I answered. That's political suicide. This isn't political. His eyes flicked toward the cameras. You'll own this. I already do. There was a brief silence. The wind shifted again, stronger. Behind us, flame crowned through a stand of pine, exploding upward in a column of sparks. Lloyd inhaled sharply. If this fails, it won't. Confidence is not volume, it is calculation. At 14:37, ignition crews began the backburn along Cedar Crest's western boundary. Thin lines of deliberate fire moved through dry grass and fencing, consuming fuel in controlled arcs. Homeowners watched from the evacuation checkpoint, some crying, some silent. I did not look at them long. Grief in the moment can fracture command. I focused on data, wind vectors, flame spread, air tanker drop timing. The main front reached the subdivision perimeter at 15:12. For a moment, the sky turned fully orange. Flames met blackened ground and faltered. Without continuous fuel, the head lost momentum. Spot fires flared, then diminished under coordinated airdrops. Heat remained brutal. Embers lifted high and scattered. Crews moved quickly to extinguish secondary ignitions. By 16:05, forward spread toward Mountain Hollow had stopped. Not slowed, stopped. Smoke drifted upward in thinner columns now. The worst had passed. I stepped outside the command unit and removed my helmet. My hair was damp at the temples. My gloves smelled of ash. Lloyd approached again, this time without cameras immediately surrounding him. He looked at the ridge, then at the charred line where Cedar Crest had stood hours earlier. You, he began, then stopped. His throat moved as he swallowed. You just rewrote my name. I did not answer. Names are not my concern. Lives are. Behind us, crews continued mop-up operations. Engines idled low. Radios crackled in calmer tones. Mountain Hollow remained intact. Cedar Crest did not. The sky slowly shifted from violent orange to muted gray. I stood there until the last of the visible flame disappeared, then turned back toward the command vehicle. There would be reports to file, statements to prepare, damage assessments to authorize, and at home, 2 people waiting who believed this day might have weakened me. They were wrong. By the time I returned home, the sky above Redwood was the color of cooled steel. Ash clung to the hem of my uniform. My boots left faint gray marks across the entry tile when I stepped inside. The house was quiet in a way that felt arranged. Diana sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open. My father stood at the counter, watching a news replay on his phone. The headline scrolled beneath footage of flame along Cedar Crest. Command decision saves Mountain Hollow. Dozens of homes lost. Diana looked up first. "There you are," she said, as if I had been late to dinner. My father did not turn immediately. He kept watching until the clip ended, then set the phone down. "You burned an entire neighborhood," he said. "I prevented the fire from reaching the valley," I answered, removing my gloves. Diana closed the laptop slowly. "That's one way to frame it." There was no tremor in my hands as I set my helmet on the counter. I had already replayed the decision in my mind twice during the drive back. Wind speed, fuel load, evacuation timing. The outcome remained constant. "You made a gamble," my father continued. "I made a calculation." Diana folded her hands. "The media is calling it bold." "They will call it something else tomorrow," I said. She studied me carefully. "You look tired." "I am." "Then you shouldn't be alone tonight," she replied softly. "This kind of scrutiny, it affects people." There it was, the same tone she had used when discussing wills and insurance, concern shaped like containment. "I'm fine," I said. My father's jaw tightened slightly. Lloyd looked rattled in that clip. "He adjusted," I answered. Diana's gaze sharpened. "You embarrassed him." I executed my duty. She leaned back in her chair. "Politics is part of duty, Emma." "No," I said evenly. "It's adjacent to it." Silence moved through the kitchen like a draft. The following morning, I left before they woke. Briefings began at 700. Damage assessment teams were already cataloging losses at Cedar Crest. Insurance representatives clustered at the perimeter. Homeowners stood in small groups, staring at blackened foundations. I walked the line personally. Heat still radiated faintly from certain structures. Chimneys stood where living rooms had been. One child's bicycle lay melted near a curb. A woman approached me, her face streaked with ash and tears. "You chose this?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "They said the fire would have reached Mountain Hollow," she said quietly. "It would have," I replied. Her shoulders lowered just slightly. "Thank you," she said. Not everyone said that. By midday, news outlets had reframed the story twice. First as decisive leadership, then as controversial authority. By evening, Diana had already begun her version. When I stepped back into the house, I heard her voice from the living room. She was on the phone. "Yes, Tom was there," she was saying. "He's been advising her privately for weeks." "Of course she values his guidance." I paused in the hallway. My father's voice followed, lower. "We've always believed in proactive strategy." I entered the room without announcement. Diana ended the call smoothly. "We were just speaking with a journalist," she said. "I heard," I replied. My father folded his arms. "You don't have to carry this alone." "I didn't," I said. "I had a team." Diana's expression remained gentle. "It helps to present unity. People trust families." "They trust facts," I corrected. She tilted her head. "Public perception is malleable." I stepped closer, close enough that she could see the smoke still embedded in the seams of my jacket. "So are records," I said quietly. The next 2 days confirmed what I had anticipated. An editorial appeared suggesting that the controlled burn had been emotionally driven. An anonymous source implied that I had been under significant personal strain. Diana forwarded the article to 3 of my colleagues before I saw it myself. One of them sent it back to me with a single word: documented. She had underestimated something fundamental. Every operational decision from Barnes Ridge had been logged, every weather report archived, every radio transmission recorded and timestamped. I requested certified copies that afternoon. By the time Diana attempted her next move, I was prepared. She filed a formal inquiry alleging instability in command judgment. The claim triggered an internal review. She expected panic. Instead, she received documentation. I attended the review session in full uniform. I brought wind charts, satellite overlays, audio transcripts. When asked whether external pressure had influenced my decision, I answered without elaboration, no. When asked whether I had consulted unauthorized advisors, I replied, no. My father was invited to submit a statement. He hesitated. Diana did not. Her written account referenced family discussions about stress and recent emotional volatility. The panel cross-referenced dates. On the evening she claimed volatility, I had been at a budget meeting with 3 division chiefs and 2 city auditors. Witnessed, logged, signed. Facts do not raise their voices. They simply remain. Within a week, the inquiry closed. The official conclusion stated that the decision to initiate a controlled burn at Cedar Crest was strategically sound and executed within full operational authority. Diana's name appeared in a footnote. Unsubstantiated claim. Local media obtained the review summary through public record. The narrative shifted again. This time, quietly. My father did not speak during dinner that evening. Diana tried once more. We were only trying to protect you, she said. I am protected, I answered. She looked at my father. He looked at the table. Pressure changes shape when it fails to penetrate. The house felt smaller now, less assured. I began drafting a formal notice regarding unauthorized access to personal documents within my residence. It would not be dramatic. It would be procedural. I delivered the notice on a Tuesday morning. It was a single page, clear language. No accusation. It stated that any access to my personal documents, digital or physical, without written consent would be considered unlawful intrusion. It referenced statutes. It required acknowledgement. I placed it on the kitchen table while Diana was arranging flowers in a narrow glass vase. "What is this?" she asked lightly. "A boundary," I said. My father entered halfway through her reading. His eyes moved across the page more slowly. "You're formalizing this?" he asked. "Yes." Diana set the paper down. "After everything we've done for you." I met her gaze. "You attempted to influence a command review." "We were concerned," she replied. "You've been under pressure." "I operate under pressure," I said. "It is not pathology." Silence followed. Not shocked, calculating. That afternoon I met with counsel. I did not describe it as family conflict. I described it as risk management, shared residence, attempted narrative manipulation, documented pattern of financial inquiry. We reviewed property law. We reviewed tenancy rights. We drafted a revocable guest agreement with a 30-day termination clause. When I returned home, I handed it to my father. "If you choose to stay," I said, "you sign this." He read the first paragraph, then the second. His hand did not tremble, but it slowed. Diana's voice sharpened. "You're treating us like tenants." "You are guests," I answered. "For now," she said quietly. "For always," I replied. The following days altered the house. Diana stopped moving freely through rooms. She no longer entered my office. She kept her laptop closed when I entered. Calls she once made in the open shifted behind closed doors. Reputation moves differently than fire. It spreads through networks. The internal review summary circulated beyond local media. It reached state offices. It reached union leadership. It reached the council chambers. An addendum appeared online clarifying that external allegations of instability had been unfounded. Diana's name did not headline it, but it was there. One afternoon, I returned from briefing to find her sitting rigidly at the dining table. "Margaret called," she said without greeting. Margaret chaired the hospital board where Diana volunteered. "She said there were questions," Diana continued, "about integrity." I removed my jacket and hung it carefully. "Public records are accessible," I said. "You could have handled this privately." "I did," I replied, "through procedure." My father stood near the window, hands in his pockets. He looked older now in a way that was not cosmetic. Something had shifted behind his eyes. "That review could have damaged you," he said quietly. It did not, I answered. You're lucky. No, I said. I was documented. The word stayed in the air between us. 2 days later, a local columnist published a follow-up piece. It praised the controlled burn strategy. It mentioned leadership under scrutiny. It noted that an attempt to undermine command authority through informal channels had failed. Diana did not leave the house that day. When she finally spoke that evening, her tone lacked polish. They're treating me like I fabricated something, she said. You did, I replied. Her mouth tightened. I was protecting my husband. My father's head lifted at that. From what? He asked. She did not answer him directly. From irrelevance. From the fact that the fire had been mine to command, not his to advise. From the reality that he had stood in a crowd once and allowed someone to question my capability without speaking. He sat down slowly. For the first time since arriving, he looked at me without assumption. I didn't think it would go that far, he said. It did, I answered. Diana stood abruptly. This is absurd. Families disagree. They don't litigate each other. I didn't litigate, I said. I clarified. She left the room. That night, my father knocked on my office door. He had not done that before. May I? He asked. Yes. He stepped inside and closed the door carefully behind him. I let her speak for me, he said after a moment. Yes, I replied. I thought it was easier. It was, I said. He sat down across from my desk, posture unfamiliar without confidence. When your mother died, he began, I didn't know how to lead anything alone. I did not interrupt. Diana handled details, he continued. Paperwork, money, social circles. I let her. And me? I asked. He inhaled slowly. You were already capable, he said. You didn't need me. There it was. Not cruelty, not hatred. Absence framed as compliment. I did, I said quietly. You chose not to. He closed his eyes briefly. I allowed silence to become distance, he said. That's on me. Yes. The simplicity of agreement unsettled him more than argument would have. I can't undo it, he said. No. But I can decide now. Yes. He looked toward the door where Diana's shadow moved faintly in the hallway light. I won't sign anything she drafts about you again, he said. I don't require allegiance, I replied. I require non-interference. He nodded once. I lost my daughter because I mistook passivity for peace, he said. I did not soften that. I built my life without you, I answered. It will remain that way. He accepted that without protest. The 30-day clause elapsed quietly. On the final morning, Diana packed in precise silence. No farewell gestures, no reconciliatory statements. At the door, she paused. You could have destroyed us, she said. I protected myself, I replied. There is a difference. My father lingered a moment longer. If you're willing, he said, I would like to call sometimes. You may, I answered. Boundaries remain. He nodded. They drove away without ceremony. The house felt larger afterward, not empty, clear. Weeks later, Barnes Ridge showed signs of recovery. Green shoots along blackened soil, Mountain Hollow intact, Cedar Crest rebuilding, control restored not through force, but through documentation and refusal. I did not celebrate. I returned to work. I returned to silence when it was useful. And when my father called the following Sunday, he waited for me to finish speaking before he answered. Distance, once established properly, can protect what closeness never did. When someone tries to rewrite your authority in your own life, do you argue? Or do you document? Tell me what you would have done in her place. And if you want to continue walking these quiet lines with me, stay.